Rain hammered the streets of Chicago's South Side the night Lorraine Carter collapsed in her kitchen. The old apartment smelled of fried catfish, coffee, and the lemon cleaner she used every Sunday after church. Her grandson Isaiah stood frozen near the stove while the pot of collard greens boiled over behind him. "Grandma?" he whispered. Lorraine tried to answer, but the pain squeezing her chest stole her breath. Her fingers trembled against the edge of the counter before her body gave out completely. The ceramic plate in her hand shattered across the floor. Isaiah dropped to his knees beside her. At 16, he already carried the exhaustion of a grown man. His hoodie smelled faintly of rainwater and bus exhaust from his after-school delivery job. Panic flooded his face as he grabbed her hand. "Grandma, stay with me. Please stay with me." The tiny apartment suddenly felt unbearably small. Outside, sirens echoed through the wet streets while neighbors argued on the sidewalk below. Somewhere nearby, gospel music drifted faintly through thin apartment walls. Isaiah called 911 with shaking hands. 20 minutes later, fluorescent hospital lights reflected across the polished hallway floors of Mercy General. Isaiah sat alone in a stiff plastic chair while doctors moved quickly behind closed doors. His stomach twisted painfully. Lorraine Carter had raised him since he was 5 years old, after his mother disappeared into addiction and his father vanished into prison. Lorraine was all he had. A nurse finally approached him carefully. "She's stable," the woman said softly. Isaiah lowered his head in relief, "but she needs surgery soon." The relief disappeared immediately. "How much?" he asked quietly. The nurse hesitated. "Insurance will help some, but not enough." Isaiah already knew what that meant. Bills, debt, impossible choices. The next morning, cold gray clouds covered Chicago. Isaiah walked home alone, through streets lined with old brick buildings covered in faded murals of black leaders, jazz musicians, and church slogans promising hope. Men gathered outside corner stores sipping coffee, while city buses roared past puddles along the curb. When he reached the apartment building, he found someone waiting outside. Marcus Reed leaned against a black Cadillac, wearing a camel-colored coat and polished shoes that looked too expensive for the neighborhood. At 48, Marcus carried himself like a man who had survived difficult things and learned never to show weakness. Isaiah froze immediately. Marcus removed his sunglasses slowly. "You got big," he said. Isaiah's jaw tightened. He had not seen his father in 11 years. "What do you want?" Isaiah asked coldly. Marcus studied his son carefully. The boy had Lorraine's eyes and his mother Renee's stubborn expression. "I heard about your grandmother." Isaiah scoffed. Funny how everybody suddenly remembers family when somebody's dying. Marcus ignored the comment. "I came to help." Isaiah laughed bitterly. "You disappeared my whole life." Marcus looked away briefly. "I know." "Do you?" Isaiah snapped. "You know what it's like watching Grandma work double shifts at the hospital cafeteria just to raise me. You know what it's like seeing her skip meals so I could eat." Marcus stayed silent. "That woman saved my life while you were gone." A painful guilt flickered across Marcus's face. The truth was ugly. Prison had hardened him, but shame kept him away afterward. Every year he promised himself he would come back for his son once his life improved. But years kept passing. Now Lorraine was sick. And Marcus finally came home too late. Isaiah turned toward the apartment entrance. "We don't need you," Marcus spoke quietly behind him. "The surgery costs $70,000. Isaiah stopped walking. Marcus reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card. "I own a construction company in Detroit now." Isaiah looked skeptical. Marcus continued carefully. "I can pay for Lorraine's surgery." Isaiah stared at him in disbelief. "But nothing comes free," Marcus admitted. The cold wind moved between them. "What does that mean?" Isaiah asked. Marcus swallowed slowly. "It means if I help, I want a chance to be your father again." The words hung heavily in the freezing Chicago air. Isaiah looked at the man standing before him, a stranger wearing expensive clothes and carrying years of regret in tired eyes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Isaiah asked the question he had carried his entire childhood. "Why did you really leave us?" Marcus did not answer immediately. The wind carried the smell of rain and car smoke through the south side street while distant church bells echoed from somewhere nearby. Isaiah stood waiting with his hands shoved deep into his pockets, anger burning behind his eyes. Marcus looked older up close. Fine lines stretched across his forehead, and grey touched the edges of his beard. Prison and hard years had left marks money could not erase. "I made mistakes," Marcus said quietly. Isaiah shook his head. "That's not an answer." Marcus exhaled slowly and glanced toward the apartment building, where Lorraine still lay fighting for her life in a hospital bed across town. "Your mother and I were young," he began. "Too young." Isaiah folded his arms. Marcus continued carefully. "I grew up in Englewood. My father drank every day. My mother cleaned houses until her hands cracked open from bleach." His voice stayed calm, but the memories clearly hurt. "I promised myself I'd never be poor forever." Isaiah listened silently. "I started hustling young, selling stolen electronics, running packages, then drugs." A city bus roared past them. Marcus lowered his eyes. "Fast money feels good when you've spent your whole life hungry." Isaiah's jaw tightened harder. "And you chose that over us?" Marcus looked directly at him. "No, I thought I was choosing survival." But survival turned into prison. Marcus explained how federal agents raided the apartment where he stored narcotics. He took charges for older men who promised to protect his family afterward. "They lied," Marcus admitted bitterly. By the time he entered prison, Isaiah was only 5. "Your mother couldn't handle it," Marcus said softly. Isaiah looked away. He barely remembered Renee Carter now. Only flashes, perfume, long fingernails tapping kitchen counters, loud arguments late at night, then silence. "She started using heavier drugs after I got locked up," Marcus continued. "Lorraine tried helping her, but addiction—" His voice trailed off. "It eats people alive." Isaiah swallowed hard. He remembered waiting near apartment windows as a child, believing his mother might finally come home. She never did. "After prison, I wanted to come back," Marcus said. "Then why didn't you?" Isaiah asked immediately. Marcus hesitated. "Because shame is powerful." The answer sounded painfully honest. Marcus explained how he moved to Detroit after release. A church mentor helped him find work in construction. He spent years rebuilding his life brick by brick. Eventually, he started his own company. Small projects became larger contracts. Money came slowly, respect came slower. "But every year I waited longer," Marcus admitted. "And the longer I stayed away, the harder it became to face you." Isaiah stared at him quietly. Part of him wanted to scream. Another part saw something unfamiliar in Marcus's eyes. Regret, real regret. "You still abandoned us," Isaiah said. Marcus nodded immediately. "I did." No excuses, no denial, just truth. That somehow made the anger harder to hold. A cold silence settled between them. Then Marcus reached into his coat pocket again and handed Isaiah an envelope. Inside was a hospital payment confirmation. $70,000, paid in full. Isaiah looked stunned. "You already paid?" Marcus nodded. "Lorraine raised my son when I failed to." Isaiah looked down at the paper. For years he imagined his father as a monster, but monsters usually did not quietly save people. The apartment door suddenly opened above them. Miss Evelyn from the 3rd floor leaned over the railing wearing a pink robe and hair bonnet. "Isaiah!" she shouted. "What?" "Hospital called. Your grandma woke up asking for you." Isaiah immediately turned toward the building. Marcus spoke quickly. "Let me drive you." Isaiah hesitated, then reluctantly nodded. The drive across Chicago felt tense and unfamiliar. Old gospel music played softly through the Cadillac speakers while rainwater streaked across the windows. Marcus kept both hands on the wheel. Isaiah stared outside silently. They passed murals honoring black veterans, old soul food restaurants, boarded-up schools, and crowded bus stops where tired workers waited in heavy winter coats. The city looked beautiful and broken at the same time. Finally, Marcus spoke. "Your grandmother still sings in church." Isaiah glanced at him. "Every Sunday?" A small smile touched Marcus's face. "She used to make me sing too." Isaiah almost smiled himself. Almost. When they reached Mercy General Hospital, Isaiah hurried inside without waiting. Marcus followed several steps behind. Lorraine looked weak in the hospital bed, but her eyes immediately filled with emotion when she saw them enter together. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. Marcus stopped near the doorway. For the first time in years, mother and son faced each other. Lorraine's eyes slowly filled with tears. "You finally came home." Lorraine Carter had spent most of her life hiding pain behind strength. But the moment she saw Marcus standing inside her hospital room again, the years of disappointment rushed back all at once. The machines beside her bed beeped softly while weak winter sunlight filtered through the blinds. Her church hat still rested carefully on the chair nearby, where Isaiah had placed it the night before. Marcus stepped closer slowly. "Ma," he said quietly. Lorraine shook her head with watery eyes. "Don't ma me after 11 years?" The words cut deep. Isaiah stood awkwardly near the window while tension filled the room. Marcus lowered his gaze. "You got every right to be angry." Lorraine laughed bitterly. "Angry?" Her tired voice cracked. "I buried my daughter in everything except a casket. Then I raised your child while wondering every birthday if you were dead somewhere." Marcus swallowed hard. "I know." "No, you don't know," Lorraine snapped. "You missed school plays, basketball games, graduations. You missed that boy becoming a man." Isaiah looked down quietly. Lorraine pointed weakly toward him. "He needed a father." Marcus nodded slowly. "And I failed him." The honesty softened something small inside Lorraine's expression, though the hurt remained. For several moments, nobody spoke. Finally, Isaiah broke the silence. "He paid for your surgery." Lorraine looked surprised. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "It was the least I could do." Lorraine stared at her son carefully. The expensive coat, the polished shoes, the tired eyes. "You really changed your life?" she asked. Marcus nodded. "Been clean 14 years now." Lorraine closed her eyes briefly. "Lord," emotion trembled through her voice. When she opened her eyes again, tears rolled slowly down her cheeks. "You should have come home sooner." Marcus's face tightened. "I know." The room grew quiet again. Outside the hospital hallway, nurses pushed carts past crying children and exhausted families. Somewhere nearby, an elderly man coughed violently while a television played morning news nobody watched. Life and suffering filled every corner of Mercy General. Lorraine finally looked toward Isaiah. "You eating enough?" Isaiah sighed. "Grandma." "I'm serious." Marcus almost smiled. Even connected to machines, Lorraine Carter still mothered everybody in sight. That afternoon, after doctors completed Lorraine's surgery schedule paperwork, Isaiah stepped outside for air. Snow had begun falling lightly across the hospital parking lot. He sat alone on a bench wearing his old black hoodie while people hurried past carrying coffee cups and grocery bags. His entire life suddenly felt unstable. His father returned. His grandmother nearly died. And somewhere beneath all the confusion was a dangerous feeling Isaiah did not trust: hope. The hospital doors opened behind him. Marcus walked outside carrying 2 styrofoam cups. "Hot chocolate," he said. Isaiah accepted it reluctantly. Marcus sat beside him quietly. For a while, they simply watched snowflakes drift across Chicago traffic. Then Marcus spoke carefully. "You play basketball?" Isaiah nodded. "Point guard." Marcus smiled faintly. "I used to play too." "You also used to sell drugs." Isaiah replied coldly. The smile disappeared. Marcus accepted the hit without defending himself. "That's fair." Isaiah stared into his cup. "Why now?" he finally asked. Marcus looked confused. "Why come back now?" Isaiah continued. "You could have stayed gone forever." Marcus took a long breath. "Because I got tired of living like a coward." Snow gathered lightly on his coat shoulders. There's only so many nights a man can sit alone in a big house before realizing money don't fix loneliness. Isaiah listened silently. Marcus looked toward the gray Chicago skyline. "I spent years building businesses, trying to prove I mattered." His voice lowered. "But every success still felt empty because my family wasn't there." Isaiah's anger shifted slightly. Not gone, but less sharp. Marcus reached into his wallet slowly. He pulled out a worn photograph. Isaiah frowned when he saw it. It was an old picture of himself at 6 years old, standing beside Lorraine outside a church picnic. The edges were faded from years of being carried around. You kept this? Isaiah asked quietly. Marcus nodded. Every day. Isaiah looked at the photo longer than he intended. A painful lump formed in his throat. Before either could speak again, Isaiah's phone buzzed violently. He checked the screen. Unknown number. He answered carefully. Hello? A woman's shaky voice came through immediately. Isaiah? His body froze. He recognized the voice instantly. His mother, Renee Carter. The woman nobody had seen in almost 8 years. Isaiah stood up so fast the hot chocolate spilled across the sidewalk. Marcus looked alarmed. What happened? Isaiah's face went pale. The voice on the phone trembled weakly. Baby, I need help. Isaiah could barely breathe. Snow continued falling around the hospital parking lot while the phone trembled in his hand. Across from him, Marcus immediately recognized the look of shock spreading across his son's face. Who is it? Marcus asked carefully. Isaiah did not answer right away. The weak voice on the phone coughed painfully. Baby, please don't hang up. Isaiah closed his eyes. For years he imagined hearing his mother's voice again. Sometimes he dreamed she returned healthy and smiling with groceries in her arms like nothing happened. Other times he imagined screaming at her. Now that the moment finally arrived, he felt nothing but confusion. Where are you? He asked quietly. A long silence followed. Then Renee whispered, Baltimore. Marcus stiffened immediately. Isaiah noticed. What's wrong? He asked suspiciously. Marcus looked uneasy. Your mother used to run with dangerous people out there. Isaiah turned away slightly. Renee's breathing sounded weak through the phone. I'm sick, Isaiah. His chest tightened. What kind of sick? Another cough. The doctors found something in my lungs. Isaiah leaned heavily against the icy bench. Part of him wanted to hang up. Part of him still sounded like a little boy desperate for his mother. I don't have anybody else to call, Renee whispered. Marcus stood slowly. Don't tell her where we are, he warned quietly. Isaiah covered the phone speaker. You don't get to tell me what to do. Marcus's jaw tightened. I'm trying to protect you. From my own mother, Marcus looked deeply conflicted. You don't know everything about Renee. Isaiah ignored him and returned to the call. What do you want from me? He asked. Renee's voice cracked with emotion. I just want to see you. The words shattered something fragile inside him. A freezing wind swept through the parking lot. Marcus watched silently while Isaiah struggled between anger and longing. Finally, Isaiah spoke. Grandma's in surgery tomorrow. Renee began crying softly. Lorraine always deserved better than me. Isaiah swallowed hard. Why did you leave? Silence. Heavy silence. Then Renee answered weakly, because addiction changes you into somebody ugly. Her honesty sounded painfully similar to Marcus earlier. I kept thinking I'd get clean and come back, she admitted. Then years passed. Isaiah stared at the snow-covered pavement. I used to wait for you at the window every night. Renee broke down, crying harder. I know. No, Isaiah whispered. You don't. A long pause followed. Then Renee spoke again. There's something else you need to know. Isaiah frowned. What? Her breathing grew shaky. The people I owed money to back then. Marcus suddenly stepped closer. What people? He demanded loudly. Renee froze on the other end. Marcus? His expression darkened immediately. Who's after you? Renee sounded terrified now. You shouldn't be involved. Marcus grabbed the phone gently from Isaiah. Renee, answer me. Isaiah watched both fear and anger flash across his father's face. Finally, Renee whispered something that made Marcus go completely still. The Holloway brothers. Marcus cursed under his breath. Isaiah looked confused. Who are they? Marcus handed the phone back slowly. Trouble. That evening, Isaiah sat beside Lorraine's hospital bed while snowstorms buried Chicago's streets outside. Lorraine slept peacefully after receiving medication, her Bible resting open beside her pillow. Marcus stood near the window, making quiet phone calls. Isaiah studied him carefully. Something about the mention of the Holloway brothers clearly disturbed him. Finally, Isaiah spoke. Tell me the truth. Marcus turned slowly. The Holloways controlled half the drug movement on the South Side years ago. Isaiah frowned. And Mom worked for them. Marcus nodded reluctantly. She also stole from them. Isaiah's stomach dropped. How much? Marcus looked grim, enough to disappear over. The hospital room suddenly felt colder. Marcus continued carefully. When I went to prison, Renee got deeper into addiction. The Holloways used her to move product across state lines. Isaiah stared at the floor. She probably ran because she feared they'd kill her. A painful silence settled over the room. Lorraine stirred weakly in bed. Marcus, she whispered. He quickly walked closer. Lorraine opened tired eyes. You keep that danger away from my grandson. Marcus nodded firmly. I will. But even he sounded uncertain. Late that night, Isaiah stepped into the hospital chapel alone. The tiny room smelled faintly of candles and old wood polish. Soft gospel piano music played quietly through hidden speakers. Isaiah sat in the back pew, staring at the cross near the altar. He had not prayed seriously in years. Life in the South Side taught people survival faster than faith, but exhaustion finally broke through his walls. My family's falling apart, he whispered. His voice cracked, and I don't know what to do anymore. Tears filled his eyes unexpectedly. Outside the chapel doors, Marcus watched silently. For the first time since returning home, he realized something terrifying. His son carried the same loneliness that once destroyed him, and if he failed again, Isaiah might follow the same road into darkness. The next morning, Chicago woke beneath thick gray clouds and dirty snow piled along sidewalks. Sirens echoed faintly through the streets while exhausted commuters crowded train platforms wrapped in scarves and heavy coats. Inside Mercy General Hospital, Lorraine's surgery began at exactly 8 o'clock. Isaiah sat in the waiting room wearing the same black hoodie from yesterday. He had barely slept. Dark circles shadowed his eyes while anxiety twisted constantly inside his chest. Marcus stood nearby holding coffee cups nobody touched. Every few minutes he checked his phone. Isaiah noticed. You expecting something? Marcus hesitated. I asked a friend in Baltimore to look into Renee's situation. Isaiah leaned back heavily. You really think those people still want her after all these years? Marcus looked grim. Men like the Holloways don't forget money. Before Isaiah could respond, the waiting room television suddenly switched to breaking news. A reporter stood outside a burned apartment building in Baltimore. Authorities believe the fire may be connected to organized criminal activity. Marcus's expression immediately changed. The camera briefly showed police tape and paramedics moving stretchers. Then Isaiah froze. A familiar woman appeared briefly in the background, wrapped in a blanket. His mother. Renee looked thinner than he imagined possible. Her cheeks were hollow and exhaustion covered her face. But it was definitely her. Oh my God, Isaiah whispered. Marcus immediately grabbed his coat. We're going to Baltimore. Isaiah looked shocked. What about Grandma? Marcus glanced toward the surgery doors. I already spoke with the doctors. Surgery will take hours. Isaiah stood slowly. The decision felt impossible. Stay for Lorraine, or finally see his mother after 8 years. Lorraine's church friend, Miss Claudette, suddenly entered the waiting room carrying a large purse and Bible. I came as soon as I heard, she said warmly. The older woman hugged Isaiah tightly, then she looked at Marcus carefully. Well, look who finally remembered his family. Marcus accepted the judgment quietly. Miss Claudette listened quickly as they explained Renee's situation. Then she touched Isaiah's shoulder gently. Go see your mama. Isaiah looked uncertain. What if something happens during surgery? Miss Claudette smiled softly. Baby, Lorraine would haunt every one of us if she woke up knowing you left your mother alone. Even Marcus laughed slightly at that. 2 hours later, father and son drove east through freezing highways toward Baltimore. The road trip felt emotionally heavy. Fields of dirty snow stretched endlessly outside while old soul music played quietly through the speakers. Isaiah stared silently out of the window most of the drive. Finally, he asked the question sitting inside him all morning. Did you ever love Mum? Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter. With everything I had. Then why'd you all hurt each other so much? Marcus gave a sad smile. Because sometimes broken people love each other before they know how to love themselves. The answer stayed with Isaiah. Hours later, Baltimore appeared beneath dark storm clouds. The city looked different from Chicago but carried familiar pain. Old brick row houses, corner stores protected by metal bars, mothers hurrying children through icy streets. Marcus drove into a rough neighborhood filled with abandoned buildings and graffiti-covered walls. "This where she's been living?" Isaiah asked quietly. Marcus nodded grimly. They stopped outside a small church shelter near North Avenue. The building looked worn but warm. A glowing cross hung above the entrance while gospel music drifted softly through the doors. Inside, volunteers served soup to homeless families escaping the cold. The smell of chicken broth and cornbread filled the air. Isaiah spotted Renee immediately. She sat alone near the back wall, wrapped in an oversized grey sweater. She looked fragile, sick, older than her 40 years. When her eyes lifted and found Isaiah standing there, emotion flooded her face so quickly it almost looked painful. "Baby." Isaiah stood frozen. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Renee slowly stood to her feet. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "You got so tall." Isaiah's emotions crashed together violently. Anger, love, confusion, grief. All at once. Finally, he stepped closer. Renee reached trembling hands toward his face. "I missed you every day." Isaiah's eyes filled immediately. "Then why didn't you come home?" Renee broke down crying. The entire shelter seemed quieter around them. Marcus watched silently from several feet away. Renee looked toward him briefly. Guilt passed between them. Old history, old wounds. Then Renee suddenly became serious. "We don't have much time." Marcus frowned immediately. "What happened?" Renee wiped tears quickly. "I stole something before I ran." Marcus's expression darkened. "What did you take?" Renee looked terrified. "A ledger." The room went silent. Marcus stared at her in disbelief. "The Holloway ledger?" Renee nodded weakly. Isaiah looked confused. "What's that?" Marcus turned pale. "It's evidence." Renee's voice trembled. Names, payments, politicians, police officers, everybody connected to their operation. Isaiah's stomach dropped. "And they think you still have it?" Renee looked directly at Marcus. "I hid it before I disappeared." Marcus cursed under his breath. Then the church doors suddenly opened. 3 large men entered, wearing dark coats. The entire shelter atmosphere changed instantly. Renee's face lost all color. "They found me." The church shelter fell completely silent. Volunteers behind the soup counter froze mid-conversation while nervous mothers quietly pulled children closer. Gospel music still played softly through old ceiling speakers, but fear had already entered the room. The 3 men standing near the entrance looked out of place among the tired families and church workers. Large, cold, purposeful. The tallest one wore a black leather coat stretched across broad shoulders. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, while heavy gold rings covered his fingers. Marcus recognized him immediately. "Terence Holloway," he muttered. Isaiah felt tension shoot through his father's body. Renee whispered shakily, "We need to leave." Terence slowly scanned the shelter. Then his eyes landed directly on Renee. A slow smile spread across his face. "Well now," he said loudly, "look who finally stopped running." Renee stepped backward instinctively. Isaiah moved beside her without thinking. Terence noticed. "That your boy?" he asked. Marcus stepped forward immediately. "Leave them alone." Terence laughed deeply. Marcus Reed. The name carried years of ugly history. "I heard prison made you respectable," Terence mocked. Marcus kept his voice calm. "I'm not here for trouble." "Funny," Terence replied, "'cause your ex-girl still owes me a problem." Several church volunteers nervously moved toward the office phone. Terence noticed instantly. "Relax," he said without looking away from Renee. "Ain't nobody here getting hurt if she cooperates." Isaiah's fists tightened. Renee grabbed his sleeve quickly. "Don't!" Terence stepped closer. "Where's my ledger?" Renee shook her head. "I don't have it anymore." The smile vanished from Terence's face. "That's unfortunate." Marcus positioned himself between Terence and Isaiah. "You got your answer." Terence looked amused. "You really want to play hero today?" Marcus didn't move. Years ago, he would have responded with violence immediately, but prison taught him something dangerous about anger. It destroys everybody nearby. Terence studied him carefully. Then his expression hardened. You got 24 hours, he told Renee quietly. After that, things get ugly. Renee's face trembled. Terence glanced briefly at Isaiah. Nice kid. Shame if he inherited his parents' bad luck. Marcus stepped forward instantly. Don't threaten my son. The shelter atmosphere turned electric. For one terrifying second, Isaiah thought violence would explode right there between church pews and soup tables. Then Terence smirked. Nah, he said calmly, not in church. He adjusted his coat slowly. But tomorrow ain't Sunday. The three men finally turned and walked back outside. The church doors slammed shut behind them. Only then did everyone breathe again. Renee collapsed weakly into a chair. Isaiah stared at her. What did you get us into? Tears filled her eyes immediately. I was trying to survive. Marcus rubbed both hands over his face. We need that ledger. Renee shook her head quickly. You don't understand. If that information gets exposed, powerful people go down. Marcus frowned. Then why steal it? Renee looked ashamed. Because I thought I could trade it for protection. Isaiah stared in disbelief. You blackmailed drug dealers. I was desperate, she whispered. The church pastor approached carefully then. Reverend Coleman was a tall older man with silver hair and tired but kind eyes. You'll need somewhere safe tonight, he said quietly. Marcus nodded. We appreciate it. The pastor looked directly at Renee. You've been carrying fear a long time, sister. Renee lowered her eyes. Fear keeps people alive. The pastor sighed softly, sometimes, but eventually it also keeps them trapped. That night, Isaiah could not sleep. The church basement had been converted into temporary sleeping rooms for families. Thin blankets covered metal cots, while old heaters rattled constantly against the winter cold. Isaiah sat awake, staring at the ceiling. Across the room, Renee slept restlessly beneath layers of blankets. Her breathing sounded rough. Marcus sat near the doorway cleaning his glasses quietly. Finally, Isaiah spoke. Did you ever think about coming back for me? Renee opened her eyes slowly. Pain crossed her face immediately. Every day. Isaiah's voice cracked with years of buried hurt. Then why didn't you? Renee sat up carefully. Because addiction turns shame into chains. Tears filled her eyes. I kept telling myself I'd come home once I got better. Isaiah stayed silent, but every year I looked worse. Her voice trembled harder. And eventually I got scared you'd hate me. Isaiah looked away quickly. The truth was complicated. He did hate parts of her, but he also missed her every single day. Marcus finally spoke from the corner. Family ain't about pretending pain never happened. Both Isaiah and Renee looked toward him. Marcus's expression remained thoughtful. It's about deciding whether love matters more than the damage. Silence settled over the basement. Then Isaiah asked quietly, Did Grandma ever hate y'all? Renee laughed weakly through tears. Lorraine Carter, Marcus smiled faintly. That woman's too saved to hate anybody. For the first time all day, Isaiah almost laughed. Almost. Then Marcus's phone buzzed sharply. He checked the screen. His face immediately darkened. What happened? Isaiah asked. Marcus looked up slowly. That was the hospital. Fear rushed through Isaiah instantly. Grandma? Marcus swallowed hard. She woke up asking for you. Isaiah exhaled in relief, but Marcus continued, and somebody tried entering her room pretending to be hospital staff. Isaiah felt the blood drain from his face. The church basement suddenly seemed colder. What do you mean somebody tried entering her room? He asked quickly. Marcus lowered the phone slowly. The nurse said a man wearing fake hospital scrubs showed up asking questions about Lorraine. Renee covered her mouth. Oh God. Marcus was already standing. We're leaving now. Outside, Baltimore streets glistened beneath freezing rain as they hurried toward Marcus's Cadillac. Wind whipped through empty sidewalks while distant sirens echoed between old brick buildings. Isaiah climbed into the back seat beside Renee. His thoughts raced violently. The Holloways had found them, and now Lorraine might be in danger too. Marcus started the engine hard. We'll drive through the night. Renee looked terrified. They won't stop, Marcus. They don't scare me anymore. But Isaiah noticed the tension in his father's eyes. Fear lived there, real fear. The highway stretched endlessly through darkness as rain hammered against the windshield. Trucks roared past while old gospel songs played softly through the speakers. Renee sat wrapped in a church blanket, coughing quietly every few minutes. Isaiah finally looked directly at her. "You really sick?" She nodded slowly. "Stage 2 lung disease." His chest tightened. "From drugs?" Renee lowered her eyes. "And smoking? And sleeping outside too many winters?" The answer hurt more than Isaiah expected. He studied her carefully beneath passing highway lights. She looked fragile, broken. Nothing like the beautiful mother he remembered as a child, dancing around the kitchen singing Anita Baker songs on Saturday mornings. "What happened to you?" he whispered. Renee looked out the window. Life. Hours later, they finally reached Chicago near dawn. The city skyline rose through heavy fog while snow covered rooftops and frozen streets. Marcus drove directly toward Mercy General Hospital, but halfway there, his phone rang again. "Miss Claudette." Marcus answered immediately. "Tell me Lorraine's okay." The older woman sounded breathless. "She's alive," Marcus exhaled, "but somebody vandalized her room." Isaiah's stomach dropped. "What?" Miss Claudette continued shakily. "They broke the window, threw flowers everywhere, wrote something on the wall." Marcus's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "What did it say?" Silence. Then Miss Claudette whispered, "Family debts get paid in blood." Renee burst into tears immediately. "This is my fault." Marcus drove faster. "No," he said sharply, "this is theirs." When they arrived at Mercy General, police officers crowded the hospital hallway outside Lorraine's room. Yellow caution tape blocked the entrance. Isaiah pushed through immediately. "Grandma!" Lorraine sat upright in bed, looking furious more than frightened. Glass shards covered parts of the floor, while overturned flowers and broken picture frames littered the room. But what caught Isaiah's attention most was the message spray-painted across the wall in red. Tick-tock, Lorraine looked toward Renee, standing behind him. Her expression softened instantly. "Baby girl." Renee collapsed crying beside the bed. "I'm sorry, Mama." Lorraine reached weak hands toward her daughter's face. "Hush now." "No," Renee sobbed. "I brought danger to everybody." Lorraine pulled her closer gently. "You came home." The simple words shattered the room emotionally. Marcus turned away briefly, hiding moisture in his eyes. Even Isaiah felt tears rising. After years of silence and pain, Lorraine still welcomed her daughter with love first. A detective approached Marcus quietly near the hallway. Detective Naomi Brooks carried herself with calm authority. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, long wool coat dusted with snow. "You Marcus Reed?" Marcus nodded carefully. Naomi glanced toward the room. "Your family's mixed up in something bigger than street threats." Marcus frowned. "We know about the Holloways." Naomi shook her head. "You know pieces?" She lowered her voice. "That ledger Renee stole connects judges, cops, city officials, and businessmen across 3 states. Marcus's expression hardened. "And the Holloways want it back." "No," Naomi corrected quietly. "They want everyone connected to it silenced permanently." Marcus glanced toward Isaiah immediately. Fear returned stronger than before. Naomi continued. "We can place your family in protective custody." Marcus shook his head. "They'll still come." Naomi studied him carefully. "Then we hit them first." Back inside the room, Lorraine slowly reached toward Isaiah's hand. "You tired, baby?" Isaiah nodded weakly. Lorraine smiled softly despite everything. "Your granddaddy used to say storms reveal people's real hearts." Isaiah looked around the room, his father standing guard near the door, his mother crying beside the hospital bed. Miss Claudette praying softly in the corner, a family broken in 100 ways, yet somehow still together. Lorraine squeezed his hand gently. "And look at that," she whispered. "The Lord done brought all my children home." But outside the hospital parking lot, a black SUV sat quietly beneath falling snow. Terence Holloway watched the hospital windows through dark-tinted glass. Then he smiled coldly. "Found them." Snow continued falling across Chicago as fear tightened around the Carter family like a noose. Inside Lorraine's hospital room, exhaustion showed on every face. The old woman rested quietly now after doctors increased her medication, but nobody else could relax. Terence Holloway knew where they were. And that changed everything. Detective Naomi Brooks stood near the doorway, reviewing files on her tablet, while uniformed officers moved through the hallway outside. The atmosphere inside Mercy General felt tense now. Every unfamiliar face suddenly looked suspicious. Marcus stared through the hospital window toward the parking lot below. "You sure the police can protect us?" he asked quietly. Naomi answered honestly, "Protection ain't perfect." Marcus appreciated the truth. Too many people lied to comfort others. Naomi continued, "But the Holloways are getting desperate. That means they'll make mistakes." Renee sat curled in a chair beneath a blanket, looking emotionally drained. "They'll never stop hunting that ledger," she whispered. Isaiah frowned. "Then maybe we should just give it back." Marcus immediately shook his head. "You don't understand what's inside that book." Naomi nodded. "If the ledger reaches federal investigators, half the Holloway network collapses." Isaiah crossed his arms. "So why hasn't anybody turned it in already?" Renee looked ashamed. "Because I hid it before I got scared." Marcus looked toward her. "Where?" Renee hesitated. Years of fear still controlled parts of her. Finally, she whispered, "Detroit." Marcus stared in disbelief. "You hid it in Detroit?" Renee nodded weakly. "In your old church." Marcus rubbed both hands across his face. "You serious?" "It was the only place I thought nobody would search." Naomi immediately straightened. "We need that ledger now." Marcus looked toward Isaiah, then Lorraine, then Renee. His entire family stood balanced between danger and survival. Finally, he nodded. "We leave tonight." By evening, freezing rain coated Chicago's streets in ice. Marcus drove carefully through traffic while Naomi followed behind in an unmarked police vehicle. Renee slept weakly in the back seat beside Lorraine, who insisted on leaving the hospital despite doctors arguing against it. "Nobody separating this family again," Lorraine declared stubbornly. Nobody challenged her. Isaiah sat quietly in the passenger seat, watching city lights blur through rain-covered windows. The road toward Detroit felt emotionally heavy. For the first time in years, his entire family occupied the same space. And somehow, danger forced them together, stronger than comfort ever did. Around midnight, they finally reached Detroit. Marcus drove through familiar streets lined with auto shops, soul food diners, and old apartment buildings glowing beneath streetlights. "This where you built your company?" Isaiah asked. Marcus nodded. "Started with 1 truck and 2 workers." Isaiah looked impressed despite himself. Marcus smiled faintly. "Your grandma used to call every Sunday checking if I was eating vegetables." Lorraine spoke from the back seat immediately. "Because black men die early acting foolish." Even Renee laughed weakly at that. The sound warmed the car briefly. Eventually, Marcus turned onto a quiet street lined with old trees and modest brick homes. At the end stood New Mercy Baptist Church. Soft yellow light glowed through stained glass windows while snow gathered across the steps. Marcus parked carefully. "This place saved my life," he said quietly. Inside, the church smelled like wood polish, old hymn books, and fried fish from Wednesday dinners. Reverend Ellis greeted them warmly despite the late hour. Then his expression darkened when he noticed Renee. "You brought trouble here?" Renee lowered her head. "I'm sorry." Marcus explained quickly. The Reverend listened silently. Finally, he sighed. "Lord always did send broken folks through these doors." He guided them toward the basement. Renee walked slowly toward an old storage room behind the choir rehearsal area. Her hands trembled as she knelt near a loose floorboard. Isaiah watched closely. After several seconds, Renee pulled out a weathered black notebook wrapped tightly in plastic. The ledger. Naomi stepped forward immediately. This could end everything. But before anyone could move again, gunshots exploded outside the church. Everybody froze. Another shot shattered a stained glass window upstairs. Women screamed somewhere near the sanctuary. Marcus instantly grabbed Isaiah and pushed him down. "Get behind the pews," Terence Holloway's voice thundered from outside. "Bring me my ledger." Chaos erupted through the church. Naomi drew her weapon while officers shouted into radios. Lorraine clutched her Bible tightly, whispering prayers. Renee looked completely terrified. "It's my fault," she cried. Marcus grabbed her shoulders firmly. "No, listen to me." Their eyes locked. You stop blaming yourself for every evil thing broken men choose to do. The words stunned her. Another gunshot echoed. Then Isaiah looked toward the church sanctuary where frightened families hid beneath pews. Something changed inside him. All his life he watched fear control people. Addiction controlled his mother. Shame controlled his father. Violence controlled neighborhoods. But suddenly Isaiah felt tired of running. He looked at Marcus. "What do we do?" Marcus stared at his son carefully, then slowly handed him the ledger. "We finish this." Gunshots echoed through New Mercy Baptist Church while terrified families crouched behind wooden pews praying for safety. Snow blew through the shattered stained glass windows as chaos spread across the sanctuary. Children cried. Church mothers whispered scriptures through trembling lips. Somewhere upstairs, alarms screamed loudly. Isaiah gripped the black ledger tightly. For the first time in his young life, fear no longer felt like the strongest thing inside him. Anger did. Marcus looked toward Detective Naomi. "How many exits?" "3," she answered quickly, but Holloway's people already covered the front. Terrence's voice boomed again from outside. "You all got 1 minute before this church becomes a funeral home." Lorraine closed her eyes. "Jesus, help us." Marcus crouched beside Isaiah. "Listen carefully." Isaiah nodded. Marcus pointed toward the rear fellowship hallway. "There's an old delivery tunnel behind the kitchen. Reverend Ellis used it years ago during winter food drives." Naomi immediately understood. "You can get the family out through there." Marcus looked at her. "And you?" She checked her weapon calmly. "I'll keep them busy." Renee shook her head frantically. "No, somebody's gonna die." Marcus grabbed her hand. "Not tonight." Another gunshot exploded through the sanctuary. Wood splintered above the choir stand. Terrence shouted again. Clocks ticking. Isaiah looked at the frightened church families around him. Old men, children, women holding babies, people already carrying enough pain. And suddenly he realized something powerful. This violence never stopped because people like the Holloways believed everybody else would always stay afraid. Isaiah stood up. Marcus immediately grabbed him. "What are you doing?" Isaiah looked directly at his father. "Ending it." Before Marcus could stop him, Isaiah walked toward the sanctuary entrance, holding the ledger visibly. "Isaiah!" Renee screamed. Terrence noticed immediately through the broken glass. A cruel smile spread across his face. "Well, look at that." Isaiah's heart pounded violently, but his voice stayed steady. "You want the ledger?" Terrence nodded slowly. "Smart boy." Snow swirled around Terrence and his armed men standing outside the church steps. Isaiah lifted the ledger slightly. "Then let everybody else leave." Marcus stared at his son in shock. Terrence laughed deeply. "You negotiating now?" Isaiah swallowed hard. "You said your problem was the ledger." Terrence's eyes narrowed. "That's part of the problem." Isaiah's voice strengthened. "You kill innocent people in a church, every cop in America hunts you forever." The statement landed. Even Terrence knew that line mattered. Naomi quietly moved families toward the rear hallway while Terrence focused on Isaiah. Marcus stepped closer beside his son. "You ain't facing this alone." Isaiah looked surprised. Marcus placed one hand firmly on his shoulder. "For once in my life, I'm staying." Emotion flashed across Isaiah's face. Outside, Terrence finally smirked. "All right then." He extended one hand. "Toss me the ledger." Isaiah hesitated. Marcus leaned close, whispering quietly. Naomi already copied every page digitally. Isaiah blinked. "When?" "While you were talking to your grandma earlier." Relief rushed through him. The evidence was already safe. Marcus nodded slightly. "Now finish this." Isaiah looked back toward Terrence, then slowly stepped outside the church doors into the falling snow. Terrence lowered his weapon slightly. "Smart choice." Isaiah held the ledger tightly. "You ruin neighborhoods," he said quietly. "Families too," Terrence shrugged. "World ruins people first." Isaiah thought about Lorraine working double shifts, about Renee drowning in addiction, about Marcus wasting years in prison, about children growing up surrounded by violence, pretending survival meant strength. Then Isaiah shook his head. "No," he replied firmly, "people choose what they become." For the first time, Terence's expression hardened with real irritation. Isaiah suddenly threw the ledger directly into the snow between them. Terence moved toward it instantly. And that was the moment Naomi shouted, "Federal agents! Nobody move!" Police vehicles roared onto the street from every direction. Blue lights exploded across the snow-covered neighborhood. Terence cursed violently. Gunfire erupted. Marcus grabbed Isaiah and tackled him behind a parked car. Officers flooded the church grounds while bullets shattered windows and car mirrors. The Holloway men scattered in panic. Terence reached desperately for the ledger buried in snow, but Naomi reached it first. She pointed her weapon directly at him. "It's over." Terence looked around wildly. Police surrounded every exit. His empire finally collapsed right there beneath church lights and falling snow. Inside the church, Lorraine held Renee tightly while tears streamed down both their faces. Reverend Ellis led frightened families in prayer. And outside, Isaiah watched his father stand protectively beside him during danger instead of running away. For the first time in his life, Marcus Reed looked like a father. Morning sunlight finally broke through Detroit's gray winter clouds. The storm was over. Police cars still lined the streets outside New Mercy Baptist Church, while federal agents carried boxes of evidence from Terence Holloway's vehicles. News reporters gathered behind barricades discussing corruption, arrests, and the massive criminal network exposed through the ledger. But inside the church, none of that mattered as much as the quiet moment unfolding near the front pews. Lorraine Carter sat wrapped in a thick blanket, while church mothers brought her tea and sweet potato pie. Nobody needed this early in the morning. "Black folks heal everything with pie," Marcus joked softly. Lorraine smiled, "And don't you forget it." The exhaustion in her face remained, but peace had finally returned to her eyes. Nearby, Renee sat quietly beside Isaiah. For the first time in years, mother and son occupied the same silence without anger tearing through it. Renee looked fragile beneath the church lights. The sickness still lived inside her body. The years still showed, but something else appeared now too. Hope. "I don't expect forgiveness overnight," she said softly. Isaiah stared ahead for several moments. Then he answered honestly, "I don't know how to forgive everything yet." Renee nodded painfully. "That's fair. But I'm tired of hating people I love." Tears immediately filled Renee's eyes. Isaiah finally looked at her. "You hurt me," her voice cracked. "I know. But you're still my mother." Renee broke down, crying quietly. Isaiah wrapped his arms around her carefully. Years of pain did not disappear instantly, but healing finally began. Across the sanctuary, Marcus stood near a stained glass window, watching snow melt slowly outside. Naomi Brooks approached, holding coffee cups. "You did good," she told him. Marcus laughed quietly. "Took me almost 50 years. Naomi handed him coffee. "The Holloways are finished. That ledger exposed half their operation." Marcus nodded. "But neighborhoods like ours keep producing men exactly like them." Naomi looked thoughtful. "Pain travels through generations unless somebody finally decides to stop carrying it." Marcus glanced toward Isaiah. His son laughed softly at something Lorraine said. That sound hit Marcus harder than prison ever did, because he realized how much joy he almost missed forever. Later that afternoon, the Carter family returned to Chicago together. The South Side looked different now somehow. Not safer, not richer, but lighter. Winter children still played basketball beside cracked sidewalks. Church choirs still rehearsed behind open windows. Smoke still drifted from barbecue restaurants while old men played dominoes near corner stores. Life continued. When they entered Lorraine's apartment building, neighbors flooded the hallway immediately. Miss Evelyn hugged everybody dramatically. Lord Jesus, this family done turned into a whole television series. Even Lorraine laughed hard at that. That night, the apartment filled with noise again for the first time in years. Soul food covered every surface: fried chicken, mac and cheese, candied yams, cornbread. Music played softly while relatives and church friends crowded tiny rooms carrying stories, prayers, and gossip. The old apartment felt alive. Isaiah stood quietly in the kitchen, watching Marcus help wash dishes beside Lorraine. It looked strangely natural, like maybe family could bend without breaking completely. Marcus noticed him watching. "What?" Isaiah shrugged. "You staying this time?" The room became quiet. Marcus dried his hands slowly, then he walked toward his son. I spent too many years running from people I loved because I was ashamed of who I used to be. Isaiah listened carefully. Marcus placed one hand on his shoulder. But hiding only creates more pain. Emotion thickened his voice. So yeah, I'm staying. Isaiah nodded slowly. Then, after years without saying the word, he quietly asked, "You want to come watch my basketball game Friday?" Marcus's eyes filled immediately. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Across the apartment, Lorraine watched the moment silently. A small smile touched her tired face. Families did not survive because life became easy. They survived because somebody kept choosing love after disappointment. Again and again and again. Later that evening, snow began falling softly outside the apartment windows while gospel music drifted low through the warm kitchen. Renee stood near the sink, sipping tea quietly. Lorraine joined her. "You scared?" Lorraine asked gently. Renee nodded. "About the sickness, about everything." Lorraine took her daughter's hand. "Baby, fear visits every house eventually." Renee looked down. "But love stays longer." Tears rolled down Renee's cheeks. For the first time in years, she believed that might actually be true. The camera of life pulled slowly away from the little South Side apartment, glowing warmly against the cold Chicago night. Inside lived a family still carrying scars, still healing, still imperfect. But together, and sometimes together, is the closest thing people ever find to salvation. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video.